Hey everyone, welcome to Mindset Talks Life Beyond the Checkboxes. I'm John Jaramillo, Leadership Performance Coach.
I'm Prati Kaufman. I'm an entrepreneur and a marketing energy coach.
As your co host for this series, we want to have real everyday conversations about topics that come up. So, we're not coming at this conversation as coaches necessarily, but we're coming at it from our different experiences. So, it's those real conversations that you have between checkboxes, again, between sessions, between clients, again, going beyond those checkboxes. So, here we break down ideas just based on those different perspectives that we have. Now, in this particular episode, we're going to talk about how it's never too late. And there have been several instances, several projects, several experiences where Prati and I have talked about what we're achieving now that we didn't before, whether we didn't have the resources, whether we didn't have the right mindset, whether we didn't have the right energy. But we've realized that there are certain things that we're accomplishing now that just didn't come up before. Maybe it's a little more confidence. Maybe it's a little more practice. There's just so many. And I've talked to so many people that do find that they are coming into their own later in their career, later in their business, that they weren't quite prepared for it in the past. So, Prati, when it comes to you and the series, the episode is "It's Never Too Late." What is it that stands out for you, or what is it you can share with us about those moments where you finally realize something or come into an experience?
I mean, there's so many of them, especially I feel like my life is not everything is about like I've never done it and I'm just going to do it and I have to learn everything like at some point in my life. So, but recently, it's funny. I've been writing for Medium, and one of my articles got accepted by a publication there, and I made $10 so far, right? So, and I was like, oh my god! So you know it felt like such a like I got such a high, and I don't even get that high from making 10,000 from my regular business per month, but that gave me a high. Like making that $10 was so valuable. And considering, I feel like it's a lifetime of work I've done to get here, because it's writing is not something. So if I get paid for marketing, to me it's not a big deal because I do have 24 years of experience in that field. But the fact I got paid for something I never thought I would be in my life, I mean, that was amazing. So that's where I think we started this whole thing. Like, wow, it's never too late to do what you think you need to do or what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's never too late has been a theme that I think has been there in several of the conversations we've had. We've never said it out loud, "Oh, it's never too late." But I think it's played out in a lot of conversations that we've had where we just got to a point where you and I both like exploring, experimenting. We don't like sitting still too much. We like seeing what's out there. We've talked about goals and how they just keep evolving. Things keep changing that you have to adapt to life. When it comes to it's never too late. I mean, for me, it's I didn't launch my coaching career until I was in my mid 30s. And I think it just came from all these little blocks of experiences falling at the right time. So anytime I go into a class to speak to students, especially, I just tell them, and they ask, "How did you get into the field that you're in right now?" I always mention that it wasn't planned. So in the past, when I was in college, I always envied my friends that were said from the very beginning, "I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that," and I had no idea. But I kept going back to school for things that sounded interesting. And luckily, by the time I was done going back to school, it made sense. And I felt most comfortable in leadership performance coaching. For me, it's leadership coaching. Like it's never too late. And we have this idea that you have to start early, that you have to start thinking about it when you're in your teens and going to school for it, maybe in your early 20s. But aside from that, I mean, I would also say writing, similar to you. Um, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I want to hear specifically from you on that question. Would you have preferred to realize these things sooner or where you realize them currently?
It's a trick question, right? Like I
No, it's
feel
not a
like
trick. It's not, I swear
yeah.
it's not a trick.
But honestly, every time personally, I don't want to change a thing about my past, because as standing here, I feel like every experience has so much value. And like like let's talk about, like the confidence. I never had confidence to do anything, yet I did it. So I would do things if I felt 50% okay most of the time. Like I can do it. Sometimes I didn't even know it, but I would take a chance, without any confidence, without anything. So I feel like that's a theme maybe for us, is never too late. Is we are willing to try, we're willing to open, and you can do this, is never too late kind of stuff when you're willing to fail, I think.
Yeah, and you and I are very similar, but at the same time, we're very different. And that's one of the areas where we're different is you always felt that that impulse to explore, that you would maybe control what you could, but even if you didn't have all the answers, you were going to jump in and see if it worked out or not.
Mm,
Me, I didn't have that early on, and I didn't have that until I would say right around the time I started my coaching career, mid 30s. Before
mm.
that, I was hesitant. Before that, I would stop myself. Maybe it's, I wouldn't say maturity because I'm not that mature, but I think at a certain point, you go through many years, experiences in life where it's kind of like you get to the point where, okay, whatever I'm waiting for, whatever I was scared of, I've been looking for it. I've been maybe scared of it. I've held the fear of it for all these years, and nothing ever happened. Um, so in short, it's to say I just got to a point where I had to be diligent. I had to be proactive about designing what I wanted to see. I think in the past I was way too passive. So luckily, yeah, it is never too late because you take all those experiences like you talked about. Just for the record, I wouldn't change anything about my path either. But I think you take all those experiences, even if you were on the search for what you were all about, and finally found that path to get there, all of that adds so much to who you are. I don't think I'd be the same coach if I had figured it out in my mid 20s, late 20s, that that's what I wanted to do, or even earlier. So there's something to be said about, like you mentioned, just all those things that you have to go through to get to where you are now.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know what your opinion is, but I always have this opinion. Like I just feel that yes, I need to get to the destination, correct? But if I'm too focused on
Yeah.
getting there, then I'll miss out on the actual. Like there has to be a combination of like, oh, I'm going to enjoy the journey, but I
Yes.
know my destination, and I have a kind of like, whereabout of where I'm going, and then just kind of take each step as it comes rather than get stuck
Yes.
in this like the journey I mapped out, and not allowing. Again, I talk about universal energy because I am into like the universe to guide you on this path. So it may be easy, right? It's never too late when you know, or you kind of, at least in a place where you feel like everything is okay, good and bad, right? And I think that comes with experience of age too. I can't expect like again a 18-year-old to think that way, but as we age, I think we have had enough experiences where we can look back and say, you know what? Even though that situation was really bad, it wasn't as bad. Look at me now.
Absolutely. I was just reading a book. It's downstairs. I try to keep them by so I can show you, but a friend got me, or a client, a previous client got me into this book, Clarity and Connection, I think it is, and it's
Hmm.
by Pablo Young. And it's kind of philosophical. It's just kind of ideas. It's not, page after page like a novel, or any other kind of book. This is just kind of like you flip the page, there's one thought or idea he has. You look to the next one, same kind of thing. Some are really short, some are really long. But in one of them, he talks about the meaning of happiness. And what you just mentioned kind of echoes that, where he says, whether that happiness, the meaning of happiness is that you're, I forget the exact word, but you're okay with things the way they are, whether they turned out the way that you wanted them to or not. So, I mean, that just resonates as true, just because, like you said, you go through that maturity process, or you're becoming an adult, and you get to that point where you realize it's like that adage that says it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. it's like what you've talked about energy, where I kind of thought of energy as yours reconciling to other people's, and you kind of laid it out where it's like, no, first and foremost, you have to think about your energy. So for me, it's all about, it's turned toward that direction where it's kind of like I'm content because I know I'm curious about opportunities, that I'm curious to explore, that I'm curious to be curious, that I want to keep exploring and just seeing what's out there. So right now, if things don't work out, I'm fine because, as you said, it's not with me. I can't look at the distance and say, this is exactly where I want to be. I've seen the value in these kind of short bursts of doing a podcast with you, doing my other podcast, taking on writing collaborations, other projects. So it's like building it as you go. And I think that's more where I am now, as opposed to saying, this is exactly where I want to be off in the distance. So that's a great point.
Yeah. And I have a question, but like there's an Indian philosopher, I can't remember the name, but there's a saying in he says something really beautiful, that poor people cannot be all about good energy because they're just struggling. And poor in the sense is people who are struggling just for the basic necessities of life, right? They're going to be happy because they're only looking. So basically, he says spirituality happens like when you start to tap into the bigger thing, when your basic needs are met. Then you start to think about, how can I contribute? What can I do? So that's why he says we all need to tap into an abundant mindset, because the more abundant we are, more likely we are going to contribute at a bigger level, rather than like it's like you can't get too sick to cure sick people. You can't be too poor to help poor people. Like you need to be in a very different place to support others. And I think that's where our value of experiences come. Like at 18 you're going to think like 18, and that is fine, but as you grow, right, those experiences can help you, and then also helping, you're kind of being a role model for others, right? It's like, so if somebody is not doing something out of the fear, because we still have that in our life, what would you suggest? Like maybe there's somebody standing here and saying, you know what, I'm 50, is it too late to do this? I'm 50, do I really want to put that kind of effort, because half of my life is over, like based on this? So what would you say when people are at the edge and they still are kind of scared to take action?
Yeah. I would say the biggest fear that we have, the biggest thing that holds us back in life, right? From what I've heard personally from my own experience, the biggest thing that holds us back is this idea that maybe we're the only ones going through it. So when someone says, I'm scared, and they say it at a certain age, to start a business, to take a risk at work, to do this, to that, whatever it may be, there's a good chance that somebody has already gone through it. um, I think what's been great about the pandemic is that it's made people more open. So you hear more about experiences. And I've seen a lot of people take more risks because everyone that we've talked to, whether in forums, online discussions, whatever it may be, where people are sharing, people are realizing how vulnerable we all are, that maybe many of us have that same kind of fear. But in short, if somebody was here and they said, this is my age, this is why I'm scared to start, there's probably somebody that's done it in your exact same shoes. At the very least, sharing that fear is a huge step forward, because you can walk through it with whoever, even if they shared their ideas with somebody who was younger and hasn't walked the path like they did. There's something to be said about sharing what your fear is, because in sharing, you get feedback from your environment, where a lot of us, like myself, for the longest time, I had all these fears, but I kept it to myself. So just the fact that someone can share it is a step in the right direction, because it's huge to be that vulnerable.
Yeah, true, and that's, yeah, we all have like our own way of working. So like for me, what has always worked is the worst case scenario. So when I decided to marry, my husband, after, saying yes to marriage after 2 days of meeting him, in my brain, I'm like, what is the worst case scenario? That we won't survive together. Okay. Am I ready to take a chance on it? Okay, right. When I started entrepreneurship, like, what's the worst case scenario? That I would lose money and I may have to go back to a job, right? The worst case scenario was that it won't be successful. But I also knew that then I'll just work. Like, there's always jobs available. It's America. You can get work in McDonald's. Like, there's always something I can do. So I always think about when those fear comes, like, what is the worst case scenario? And then once my mind thinks, okay, it's there and I am more than able to manage it, no matter what happens, I just can then move forward without like too much worries.
Yeah, I think in the last episode we had, I talked about Maslow's hierarchy, where the first one is the biological, the physiological, your body's needs, shelter, food,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Safety and security is one step above that. Love and belonging is that.
Mm.
Esteem, looking for respect is one level above that. And then the final one is it's almost like transcendence, like self-fulfillment. That kind of flow of finally discovering what your purpose is, for example. Um, and I think with me, what's helped is that I came from a blue collar background. My parents were, they would say poor. They've apologized to this day about what they couldn't give us. Now I'm in a better spot than they ever were because of the support, because of all their sacrifices. So they've afforded me that I don't have to worry or have the same stresses that they did. So my point in bringing up the hierarchy is like most of that is already covered. The security, the physiological, the safety. They taught me how to be about family and how to be about friends. So that's like the third level. So now I'm working on respect, right? Respect in my field, being taken seriously, however you want to put it. That's what so I'm working on the last two levels, that respect and the esteem that you want from people, and then also that ultimate fulfillment. I think when you fulfill those bottom levels sooner, you give yourself more room, I guess, to experiment with what's above that. So when you talk about I don't know, just poverty. I can relate. I mean, it was a certain level of poverty. It wasn't, there was definitely people that didn't have as much as us, but I think there's something to be said about from one generation to the next, the risk that you can take because of that, those foundations that were set for me by my parents.
Yeah, I mean, that's another topic we will explore, right? Because sometimes I also feel like there are people who are in a worse circumstances than us, but they have way more powerful mindset.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm always curious to understand, like, how do you do this, and what, like, that's really a huge another, like, people like Oprah's and Tony Robbins, they grew up so poor and foster homes and all, yet there was an innate belief in them that their life can be better. But that's, I think, is like a huge another topic. It's almost like they were not defined by the circumstances. They moved way past that very soon, or maybe they were, is it something you're born with? I don't know, but I'm always like trying to understand that those people who just kind of have the inner knowing, just because I'm here doesn't mean I have to stay here.
Yeah. I have no idea. I
Yeah.
have no idea what goes into that, nature versus nurture. We've talked about the power when we talked about energy of one person just saying one word to you, one phrase, one paragraph's worth of wisdom and knowledge. So if I plant the seed in my son's head about, whatever's around you, it's up to you. You can build beyond that if you choose. Will he take it forward? Will it lay the foundation for each of the lessons that he points out? And again, maybe he gets to where he's supposed to be sooner than I did, but I still don't regret what I went through because everything I experienced leads to today. So, um, yeah, I mean, for me, that's how I would wrap it up. Is just everything along the path, the people, the experiences, whether good or bad, even the bad, I won't forget because that contributes to my resilience today, my work ethic today, everything that I am today.
True. So, what would be the one final piece of thing you would say to our audience, like when it comes to doing something, right? They're hesitant, or they're thinking about, or they're a little bit of like, should I or should I not? What would you say?
I would say find your tribe, not people that have the same idea as you necessarily, although it's good to find somebody that's kind of done what you want to do, like as a mentor, as a guide, but find the people that have that same kind of energy for curiosity and keep meeting new people. I mean, it's the law of numbers where you're trying to find someone that's going to ignite something in you. Because if you ask one person and they say no, that's a dumb idea, a lot of people will stop there. So find somebody that you can bounce those ideas off of. You can tell they're really invested in learning about you, why it is you want it, and they can go back and forth with you. I think too many people stay in the circumstances where they are, and that's what limits them the most.
Yeah, that's a great advice.
How
Thank you.
about how about you, Prati? How would you word it? How would you give that last piece of advice
See, I'm
based
such
on
a
this?
doer. I'm a doer. I always say confidence comes from doing, not from thinking. Take a step, even if it's a one little step towards whatever you want, right? You don't have to leave your safe job. If you need safety, keep your day job, keep the, retirement account, fill it up, and then take some time out to take that little first step, whatever that is, however big it is. Don't look at the mountain. Just take the step. That's it.
Yeah, I think you and I are kind of balanced where you take that step versus I'm like overthinking, overthinking, overthinking. But it's good that we have that combination of attributes.
Yes, this is it. So yeah, as usual, guys, thank you if you're watching this. Thank you for listening, and thank you for engaging with us. And if again, I'm taking over John's role today. Like
No,
if you
no,
have
not at
a
all.
topic you would like us to talk about, or if you like what we are doing, engage with us, drop a comment. We would really appreciate that.
You said it perfectly. If anybody needs anything, reach out. You know how to find us based on where you find this. So thank you. And until the next episode, take care.
Yeah.
Bye.